Okay, good morning to everyone again. As I told you now, we have a really interesting roundtable about the globalization of investment with Pedro Cerdeira, Managing Partner of Business Plug, Carlos Martín, Consejero de Economía y Competitividad del ICE, Eric Díaz, General Partner de Black Sheep. Nada, os dejo con ellos y disfrutar mucho de esta roundtable.
Hi, good morning everyone. Now, I see that there aren't that many. I'd assumed, or I'd sort of focus this on the startups. So I can see hands. How many of those that are here are startups? Okay, one or two. Okay, not that many, but that's what we're going to focus it on. So apologies to the rest of you. So listen, before we start, if everybody could introduce themselves, I'll start. So I'm Tom Horsey. I'm managing partner of Ionic Fund. We're a relatively new fund focused on early stage startups in Spain. Very focused on value added. So our first filter is those companies that we can actually add value to in the most optimal way. And then if each of you could just give a quick sentence so everybody knows who we are. Pedro, you start.
Thank you. Good morning, Salamanca. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you to the organization for the invitation. People from the startup world, you're on the right place, okay? And you have an edge because none of the others are here. Just a few words about myself. So I sort of multitask myself in between a couple of things. I teach strategic management consulting at university. I have a consulting company as well, which is now very busy taking Web3 into the corporate world. And I'm also an investor in early stage startups. I'm actually on the board of the Portuguese Association of Early Stage Investors. We sort of congregate all the investors in the country interested in startups and in the ecosystem.
Great. Well, hello. My name is Antonio Peña. I'm managing partner of Kamai Ventures. Kamai Ventures is the first open CVC in Latin America. We have from LPs Coca-Cola Company and also Arcor, that is an Argentine multinational company that develops foods and also agribusiness and packaging business in all around the world. Basically, we invest in seed stage in different verticals that goes from biotech to fintech to logistics. And we invest from Mexico to Argentina in all the region. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of us, all of you.
All of us as well.
Yes.
All of us. Good morning, everyone. Brian Marinan is my name. I'm with Team ABC Ventures. So we're an Ireland-based fund, but we invest globally. In fact, none of our investments so far have been in Ireland. And we specialize in the sustainability of transportation and travel. We are early stage, so often first check-in, pre-seed, and then we follow through for the rest of the life with that company. I'm delighted to be speaking on this panel because globalization of investment is something that I'm massively passionate about, and actually it's been proven time over time that founders with a global mindset actually outperform everyone else. So looking forward to this conversation.
Well, good morning, everyone. Carlos Martín, I'm the regional minister of economy. So I guess I'm the most boring part of this roundtable and the public side of the table. We also run a platform for startups in Castilla and León. So I guess that our point of view might be somehow interesting and useful for you guys if you're looking for financial and service means for new startups here in Castilla and León.
Fantastic. So really interesting what you just said, Brian, about first ticket, but we'll go into that in a minute. Because as at least for ourselves as with the fund, we're very much dependent on where our deal flow comes from. And we find that the deal flow tends to be local, the majority of it. And from an international perspective, it's very difficult to, or at least we find it very difficult to actually identify very early stage. You said first ticket. Well, that's, you know, very early stage. They're not on the radar. There are no press releases. Before we jump into the question, because it's one I have in my desk, you know, startups that want to contact you or that could be interested in international investors, yourselves as well in LATAM, how do you find the startups? Or because it's easier for them to find you, but they probably would they? I mean, no, and I don't mean that because you're not great investors, but I mean the first thing you do is you go to, you know, I'm in Castilla y León, I go and look to the local investors in Salamanca or in Valladolid or whatever. You don't think, if you're a startup in Estonia, I'm going to get hold of some guys in, you know, in Dublin.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're in Dublin, but I assume so.
Yeah, so it is right. So just like startups are looking for an edge, we investors are also looking for an edge. We have to convince LPs to invest in our funds so that we can then go invest in you. And so we need to create a niche or an edge over the other people that are around us. For us, that was specialization. So when we have a relatively narrow focus around sustainability of transport and travel, that's the message we then send out to the world. And we do that quite aggressively. Pre-pandemic, I was in 32 countries in 18 months. Not very sustainable, I admit, but we are trying to change that, and the pandemic actually helped that in terms of turning so many events virtual. But we do this, we come out to visit the companies. The other side of it is when someone goes out and Google investors in transportation, we want to be up on the search rankings, we want them to say, hey, there's a specialist fund that could actually work with us, that has the contacts that we need, that are going to be so much better than a generic local investor. We hope that they're thinking along those lines. So that's one of our things. We also then have been deeply embedded in the industry for quite a while. So we have contacts, and we know that if people come to them to say they have a startup, then they'll refer them on to us. So our niche is how we're able to get in earlier, and we hope that that translates into more exciting opportunities than just concentrating on a particular geography does.
Okay. And yourselves?
Well, in LATAM is a great opportunity because there are a very solid ecosystem that is very active and have a lot of relationship between the countries. Myself and my partner Gabriela, we came from being entrepreneurs from the first wave of internet, and then I think that by the age we became venture capital, but we have a very close relationship with startups, and basically what we see that is the main opportunity to look for new startups is recommendation from other entrepreneurs that we invest, and also from being in the ecosystem. No? I think that what is happening now with all these companies getting in the ecosystem is like the only thing that was faltaba, that
was
missing in the Latin America ecosystem. So I believe that we have an active role in the roots of the entrepreneur ecosystem, and we try to work very close with other CVCs or venture capitals like Arca Ventures, FEMSA Ventures, or different, giving us pipeline and recommendation between one to another. But and then I think that the next wave is that you may have a role more active in Latin America. In Latin America, we have that our startups see more often to the States as the next step, and I believe that, especially with Spain, where we have these solid cultures and roots between us, I think we are seeing that Spain is becoming one of the doors to Europe, especially, for example, now we have a company that is called Auravant, it's an AgTech company, and instead of being the headquarters in States, the headquarters is here in Spain. So I think that this active relationship between us and being in the roots of the ecosystem will give us better pipeline, more, and what Brian is making, like us, pre-seed and all these kind of things, you have to be there.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, that's what I was thinking. I was just thinking how difficult it is for us to generate deal flow in Spain, you know, running around from Salamanca to, I don't know, to Bilbao, to Castellón, to Valencia, to, you know, wherever it be. I was thinking, how do you do that on a, you know, on an international level? Anyway, sorry, that was really a question of mine.
Well,
So,
bizarrely, on Monday I have a call, we're in a final due diligence call
yes.
with someone from Argentina.
Yes,
So,
yes, we have.
Can I argue the other side of this?
please do. That's what we're here for. Yeah, go on.
So I actually think that it's not very difficult to generate deal flow. And that is not my experience, to be honest with you. Why is that? We're social animals, so we rely on connections. There's this theory wandering around about the 7 hops until you get to somebody else in the world, and I do think that it is true. And I'll give you an example. Just last week, one of the projects that I'm putting together is a coding academy, and I did a webinar on Thursday last week, and suddenly half of the people on the webinar were from Uzbekistan. I have never set foot in Uzbekistan. So the word does go around. The world is not such a big place as we might imagine. In one way or another, all the ecosystems are connected, some better than others. There's a lot of wandering around from the founder community, people that do projects here and then go there, and then there's digital nomads, and there's this and there's that. So I don't think it's really difficult to get to deal flow, and I get a lot of deal flow. What is difficult is another thing, which is to qualify it and to find the proper deal flow and the one that fits your criteria. And in here, what I find most difficult is to understand what are the local constraints and restrictions when you invest. What happens if you put together a company in Spain? What do you need to do? How bureaucratic is it? And that's basically why everybody keeps on flooding to the US, because it's common sense and 99% of people know what they can count on. But the other thing that is also difficult is that in the early stage part of the investment, you need to see what is being cooked before it leaves the kitchen. So you do need to know the people, you do need to understand if they behave or if they misbehave, if they drink too much or not really. So most of that thing goes around in events like this. And I see it as part of my work, putting myself out there and just wandering around and talking to people. And then things sort of come back in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, okay. So that brings me to the first question that we really had or the first topic that we had, which was in terms of, okay, so if I'm a startup and let's assume, for argument's sake, that it is relatively easy to contact and to identify and to contact the right investors in different parts of the world that fit my particular startup. I'm not so convinced. You can do it, but I think there's a lot of work to do so in an optimal fashion. You know, right now then, where should the startup be looking? I mean, who's investing? What countries? The US are probably maybe going a little bit more slowly than Europe, because it sort of hit them, the wave sort of hit the US maybe a little bit faster than it did here. Where should they be looking? You know, if I'm I'll explain myself better. So if I'm a startup in Salamanca and I go to some business angels in Salamanca, I'm an early stage startup, no traction, got a great idea, MVP. And I go to some local investors in Salamanca, just thinking about valuations. I'm probably looking at like a 500,000 to €1 million valuation. If I take that same startup and I get in touch with an investor in London or in San Francisco or in Berlin or in Paris or in Stockholm, I'm probably going to be asking for a 2.5 to 3 million valuation. So from a dilution perspective, the startup should be looking, in a way, they should be looking, you know, at those centres. Is that sensible at the moment? Is that not so? does that make sense? I think they're going to find it more difficult to do it. So it might be, it might be like a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You never quite get there. But anyway, I don't know, comments. Go on, from a local perspective.
Okay, from a local perspective, let me be a little bit pessimistic at the beginning. Okay, if you are in a startup in Salamanca, you're not going to find a local investor in Salamanca in the short term. Okay, that's what we're here for, the public administration. So we're missing here a stage. We don't have a quite a mature network of investors. We're not linked to international investors. We can play this role, let's say that way, okay? In the early stages, we're here to identify, because we are public administration, and we're quite close to the talent from the universities, for example, okay? We do not control, but we have the means to finance a university, so we know we're close to the talent. It doesn't mean that we care for talent, okay? We are public administrations, okay? So our system is just in the short term, in the early stages, try to identify this talent and take care of them in the first 3 months, see what they're missing, train them in the protocol. We have a launching program, 3 months, and then we have a scaling up program for 5 years. After that, we guarantee that we will be investing in the company, at least 75,000 euros. We've already invested 2 million so far in 26 projects, programs full of talent, and that has been multiplied by 20 times already. So 700 people already employed here in this ecosystem. This thing is that we didn't have 10 years ago. If you recall, 10, 15 years ago, we were going through a crisis. We're entering a crisis now, okay? So politicians used to turn their back on talent. Okay? Now we kiss entrepreneurs in order to get votes, okay? And this is something that we are still missing. We don't have a quite clear connection with international funds, and we're close to the talent. We know how to recognize that talent, and we have a protocol to launch these people up. But we can enter in a small scale, only up to 100,000 euros. So we need this type of network of international investors so that we can scale up the whole process a little bit better.
Well, and like I say, that is it? I don't know. I guess my question was, so that's that's something that you actively promote. It's something that the startup founders have it close at hand, but should they be looking, does it make sense to go and look for the pot of gold? That's really my question. I mean, if they're in sustainable transport, it probably does make sense for them to contact you and say, hey, look, Brian, I do sustainable transport. Yeah. But I don't know, it's really a question, because it's a hell of a lot easier to obviously look, well, obviously not if you're looking for local investors in Salamanca, but Madrid's a 2-hour journey away. Yeah. So it's a hell of a lot easier for these founders to go to Madrid than to try and look up on Google and find ABC Ventures.
I think what's really interesting, firstly, 75k is a decent amount of money. Yeah. You get a company to the next stage pretty well with that, so well done on that. That's incredible. It's all about competition, really. So if you're going global looking for investment, you also are facing global competition. If you're looking for local business angels, they're probably not going to have the same knowledge of the market. When I travel, I go to conferences like this, and I literally walk around and go, that's the French version of that, that's the German version of that, that's the Italian version of that. So to find new ideas is actually really challenging. And oftentimes we're not looking for that. We're looking for people who execute better than their international peers. And so that's what you're looking to do. When you get 75k locally, you make sure that you put that to use and you get a better MVP, you get a better market traction than everyone else. Even yesterday, I got a message here asking for a meeting from someone who said, we're the first and only company that does that. And off the top of my head, I didn't even need to Google it, I had 3 examples of companies that already do that. And I'm like, if you're doing that with business angels, you might get away with it. If you're looking at a specialist in the sector, don't try and play that ploy, or don't be stupid enough to not Google it yourself in the first place. So yes, look for those international opportunities, because that'll broaden your knowledge set into your company. It'll broaden your network in terms of being successful internationally, but also be very aware that you're going to be facing significantly more competition, and be prepared for that. Use these kind of programs to actually develop your skill set and your approach, and be ready.
And I mentioned, I mean, obviously Portugal has been a very sort of outward-looking, international-looking country for centuries, right? I guess you see, exactly the same.
It is, but I think it goes back a little bit. So I would say that 90% of the startups that I see, and this is where you guys from the startups are going to get your money today, do not have a plan to conquer the world. And by definition, a startup is something which is built to scale, and the upper limit is the world. It's not where you live. It's not your city, it's not your country, it's not your continent. There's no such thing. You are building for the world and aiming for the world. If you get there or not, that's another type of conversation. Okay? And if you are the right people to do it or not, even another type of conversation. But I don't see the plan. Most of the time, I don't see the plan. Of course, there's different valuations and there's arbitrage to be done here. I mean, if you go and get yourself on a plane to London, it's going to be a lot different than what it is here in Salamanca. Because again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, such as valuations. But the level at which you need to have your game to go to London, it's totally different than what you need to do here. So if you have a plan, I'm going to conquer the world, and I'm going to do this plan because first I have no idea how to get there, and I'm going to start by going around here in my neighborhoods, and then I'm going to ask my friends and my family and the fools to invest in me, and then the business angels around me, and then I'll go to the corporate programs, the public administration programs, all of that. All of these are tools to help you, all of it. But they make sense in the right time, in the right place, in the right context. And I don't see a lot of people having this view of, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to resort to whatever public programs I have here, and then I'm going to go to London, and I'm going to get money, and then I'm going to go for the US market, which is bigger, and this and that, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a little bit lack of vision and planning, because, I mean, if you're doing a startup, you're not going to be the king of your neighborhood. You're going to be the king of the world. Done. Simple as that.
Okay, so I'm going to take that point and go on to sort of, you talked about corporates and open innovation. And I'm just wondering, because you look at sort of globalization and you think, yes, it should be a global market and startups should be going out there and they should be competing on a global level. And then we've just mentioned corporates. Corporates at the moment, at least in my experience, are being more active than they were a year ago, which is, you know, contrary to the majority of investors at the moment. But corporates tend to be very much based on national budget. And you know, we were just, Brian and I were talking earlier to somebody from the Guardia Civil. You know, that's a national budget. You're not talking global in those respects. So if, you know, if corporates are one of the ways forward, is it possible that to a certain extent limits the extent to which you're looking at globalization? I don't know.
In our case, one of our characteristics is that our two of our LPs, Coca-Cola and Arcor, are multinational companies. They have operations in all Latin America and in all the world. And we have another thing that is like the distinguish of us, that we know only invest in our startups if we help them to develop business with these corporations around the region. So for us, it's more natural to help our startups to make this path for all the region. And Latin America also have this characteristic because our economies and our countries always in different crises, that they are very trying to get to another country very fast. So for mainly all the entrepreneurs in Latin America, speaking about Argentina, Ecuador, Central America, they are always trying to get to another country. So it's more natural for them to develop this. And in the case of Coca-Cola, for example, and in Arcor, they are working they make the path from transformation labs to understand what is innovation to the real play that is start investing in the companies. That it's not an easy path. They have to understand that they will not have the major participation in the startups, that maybe a competition could invest in this startup, but they are understanding that the opportunity of being close to the startups is very interesting for them, for the executives in the company. And also I think that startups are understanding what important is to develop a sustainable business based in the expertise of our corporation, that they work not so fast, but they are going to more actively to a...
And they do that internationally, so it's
Yes.
not, it's not, okay, I'm working with Coca-Cola Brazil, and to work with Coca-Cola Mexico is like a completely different deal.
The best example of that is that, for example, we make a board with two directors of Coca-Cola and two of Arcor in our fund that is independently of the companies. We manage from Overwood, that is our investment company. But for example, the Coca-Cola team is a director of Brazil, Paulo Mendes. The other one is in Colombia with Carlos Mira, and the other one is in Argentina. And they see all the region. We make, for example, boards of innovation with all the FEMSA, ARCA, all the distributions of Coca-Cola. And the same happens in Arco, for example.
And Brian and I actually met last week on the jury of EIT Urban Mobility, and that does that tries to, I think it have like 50 partners of town halls around Europe that they try to develop pilots across more than one country and more than one specific city and whatever. But is that normal? I mean, I often see it here in Spain, for example. You talked a bit, maybe not Coca-Cola because they are more global in their vision from the very center, right? But I can think of a number of corporates where every country, in effect, is a different deal. Slightly easier the second country to the first, but it's very much a different deal. Is that what you see? I don't know, Brian, Pedro, is this what you're seeing? I mean, if you work with, I don't know, can't think of the Portuguese company now, but
Telefónica.
Telefónica. Portugal Telecom's not a good example, right? But you know, if you work with, it's still Carrefour in Portugal, right? So no, it's Continente in
Sonar,
Portugal.
yeah, that's the mother
Sonar.
company.
If you work with Sonar, okay, they only, well, I guess they're in Portugal and probably Mozambique or Angola as well. Or whatever.
Places as well.
But do you find that and maybe this is a European problem in large extent, but do you find that, you know, taking this across borders and doing distinct pilots?
So the corporate game, it's a difficult game to play. I've spent about 30 years of my life there, and it's difficult, and you need to understand it, which is something that usually startups don't. Okay, if you know how to play the game, then it ends up being easier because there's always somebody somewhere which is responsible for a region, for a continent, for whatever, and it's not that hard to climb up there if you know what to do. Okay, so if you actually, and it goes back to what I was saying before, if you actually demonstrate that something is working and it's replicable, people will want to do it. And it's sort of, oh, that's working over there, oh, I wanted to, come on over. So it tends to get a little bit easier, but it's not easy to navigate. That's the real issue. And most of the points of decision and power are pretty far away. especially if you're residing in LATAM or whatever, there's always somebody which is responsible for the South America and then the Americas and whatever, but it can be done. The other interesting part is that they need the startups more than the other way around. It's incredibly difficult to innovate inside the corporate world because you will always end up touching the revenue lines one way or another. It's a very complex environment, especially in the big companies, and people don't like to innovate that much, but there's no other way. And that's why they do these open innovation programs, and they try to learn from the startups, and they sort of isolate things on the side so that people don't get worked up about these types of things. But you actually do need to play how to play the game.
Okay. All right, well, we've reached the end of time, so I'm not sure we've answered the question very well, but if we haven't, it's totally my fault, so I apologise. But just because we are here, and I know that Brian's very interested in finding sustainable transportation startups. Sorry, I've completely forgotten the name. Carlos is very interested in supporting startups here. So if we could just each say, what's the best way of getting in touch with you? What's the best way of a startup in Salamanca getting this 75,000 and the support?
In our case, yes. In our case, I do represent the regional government, so the best way is to get in touch with our development agency called ICE and submit your project of startup, your idea, and then bring in and be in the channel and in our protocol to be part of this Wolaria, which is our system, our platform. That will be helping you with the first H's of your project, and then we will be helping you with financial needs. No matter what idea you have, we're going to help you.
Brilliant. So startup, Salamanca, Castilla Leon, 75 grand and support for up to 5 years. Brian, how should they get in touch with you?
We're pretty open with how we deal, so get me on LinkedIn, get me on email, brian@teamabc.vc. We're open to people from anywhere, of any background. We're particularly interested in diversity. Sorry, there's no women on this panel, but we're really interested in just hearing from as many people as possible and engaging with you. Thank you.
Myself's the same. Grab hold of me on LinkedIn.
The same with us. You can get in kamaiventures.com and you can get in contact with us. And another thing that I want to say, because there are a lot of entrepreneurs here, that I believe that also is an opportunity with Latin America is that entrepreneurs start speaking with other entrepreneurs, not only with VCs, because there are a lot of opportunities of making this company, these startups, global or from different continents, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs looking for partners here in Europe, and you can get good partners also in Latin America to get this company and to be more easy to get money. We have an active business and venture capital ecosystem in Latin America, and I believe that entrepreneurs also have to speak with each other and look for partnerships and maybe to be partners of their startups in the different regions.
And I guess that's also something that if somebody gets in touch with you and says, look, we're interested in going to LATAM, it's something they can get in touch with you, you can help them and point them in the right direction.
Of course.
And Pedro?
LinkedIn is the way to go, or eventually Telegram if you want.
Well, there we go. Well, you did say Web3, didn't you? We've got a crypto enthusiast. I think I'm in like 700 different crypto Telegram groups. They can add to you automatically, can't they? So it's a bit of a nightmare. Anyway, thank you very much, guys. I hope we've answered questions. Feel free to grab hold of any of us afterwards. We're here to help you because that helps us. It's quite selfish, really, in many respects. And thank you, everybody, for your participation on
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.